Hi everyone, it's Christy from Green Eyed Tarot, and I am here today to film my hashtag autumn decks. So basically all the decks that I typically use around this time of year, basically just tarot decks. I'm only really focusing on tarot decks today because when I started really thinking about this and pulling out decks, I realized how large my stack is. So this is going to be long enough without adding Oracle into the mix. So it's just going to be tarot decks. So grab a cup of coffee or a tea or a nice warm drink or a nice cold drink and settle in because this is going to be a long one. Hi again, everyone. Okay, so we're going to get right into the autumn or fall decks that I typically use around this time of year. They're the ones that kind of really give me that autumn vibe, that fall equinox, Samhain vibe. So I typically use these decks right through Thanksgiving until we get closer to the holidays, to the Yule holiday, to Christmas. So these really carry me through until that time. And like I said, I only did focus on tarot decks because I feel like I have a huge stack of them. I do love fall. It's pretty much my favorite season. And so I tend to gravitate toward decks that give me that kind of feeling. So I have quite a few of them. So we're just gonna get right into it and start with the decks. Okay, so here's one that I've been using through the month of September. So I've kind of already featured this a bit on my deck, but this is the Otherworlds Tarot. This definitely just gives me fall vibes. I'm not sure if it's the colors, just sort of like the theming of this deck. It's a very fae-based deck, but it's definitely giving me those fall sort of witchy vibes, which I absolutely love. Like I said, I've been working with it through the month of September, and it's been really great. Like, it's been giving me really, really wonderful readings. I've been pairing it with the Urban Crow Oracle, which is by the same creator, MJ Cullinane. So obviously they go like really well together. But yeah, just giving me, I don't know, those really fall vibes. Like this one with the pine cones. And just, it's giving me that really earthy feeling that I typically get around the fall equinox. I start to take more nature walks. I actually did that yesterday. We had a beautiful early morning, very chilly, 50-degree nature walk yesterday at one of our arboretums in the area, and it was just fabulous to get out in nature. And so, yeah, so this definitely just kind of gives me that very earthy, very fall equinox. Like, look at this, look at the colors in this. It's definitely those orangey, fiery reds and yellows and just that burnt orange. It's just wonderful for this time of year. So this is the Otherworlds Tarot, definitely giving me those fall vibes, the backs. So yeah, so I've been using throughout September. We'll continue to definitely use this right up until and through Samhain, I'm sure. Next up, I have the Otherworlds Tarot. Now this deck is out of print. I really hate showing out of print decks, so I apologize in advance, but this is an out of print deck. A fellow member of our wonderful and beautiful tarot community actually gifted me this deck. It was just one that I've been really looking for, really searching for, and the copies that I found were just way out of my price range. So this is a blessing and a gift. So I love to bring it out during this time of year just for the connection to sort of that abundance and, you know, that feeling of prosperity and just being a gift. But it definitely also gives me sort of fall vibes. I absolutely adore the backs of this deck. So it is a Rider-Waite-Smith clone. But to me, it definitely gives me fall autumnal vibes. It's definitely has a sort of a medieval feeling to it, but something about it also just kind of gives me that fall energy. Like if you see, I don't know, these branches sort of like are devoid of leaves already, like it just is definitely kind of giving me that feeling of being in the fall or in the autumn. But this deck is absolutely beautiful. Like I said, I lusted after it. I was looking for it for so long, and then it just made its way to me. And don't you just love how that happens and how the universe sort of answers you in the form of this beautiful gift from another beautiful tarot soul from our community. So yeah, but yeah, just something about it gives me that autumnal feeling. I usually tend to pick up this deck as we get into October, and I usually use it throughout the winter. That's what I did last year. And so this definitely could be a winter deck as well, but I usually start to work with it like in the month of October as we head towards Samhain, and then through November around Thanksgiving, definitely, just because of like that feeling, like I said, of being grateful and abundance, and like the fact that this was a gift was just absolutely amazing. And I have such a strong connection with this deck just for that feeling that it brings. But look at this Empress. She just gives me all of the fall vibes, and I just adore it. I absolutely love this deck. I'm so thankful to have it. Definitely one of my favorite autumn decks. And as I said, I'm so sorry it is out of print, but this is the Otherworlds Tarot deck. And it's just absolutely beautiful. So this is the Pams Vintage Tarot. So this is a traditional Rider-Waite-Smith deck. I got this off Make Playing Cards. These are the backs. As you can see, they're sort of made to look antiqued, hence the name Pam's Vintage. But this definitely, just the coloring on this, obviously, just sort of gives me that autumnal feeling. Sort of that like feeling of like the dark coming in, you know, sort of moving into that dark, shadowy sort of half of the year, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere. So I definitely, you know, this, you know, the coloring on this always kind of gives me those earthy autumnal vibes. So it's just a traditional Rider-Waite-Smith deck. Usually if I want to use Rider-Waite-Smith during this time of year, this is the one I pull out because this just kind of has that aesthetic to it. So this one's kind of really just about aesthetics. It's your traditional imagery. So if Rider-Waite-Smith is not like one that you connect with, probably not going to like this one, but I do love like the antique-y, you know, coloring on it. So yeah, so definitely gives me those fall vibes. And this is the Rider-Waite-Smith deck that I will use, you know, during this time of year as we start to get into the colder months. It just has that sort of fall vibe. Like I said, I love the coloring on it. The cardstock is really nice. This is Make Playing Cards, like Superior Smooth, so I actually like it a lot. It almost feels linen. It's not the linen cardstock, but it like has that feeling of it. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's definitely not linen. It's the Superior Smooth, but it's just really nice. Like I said, it fans out really nice. Good for a good old traditional Rider-Waite during the fall months. So next up is the very familiar backed Pagan Otherworlds Tarot. So this deck is really interesting. I know like people kind of have a love-hate with this deck sometimes, also because it's extremely slippery and large. So people with small hands, I know, have an issue with this deck. But this deck to me, I don't know, just gives me those fall vibes. To me, this is sort of gives me the feeling of like the epitome of like sort of the Celtic primordial world. I know a lot of decks that are like the Celtic Tarot or claim to be Celtic themed. You know, sometimes the imagery is more storybook, more fantastical, more fantasy based than, you know, would be based in reality. But for me, this deck sort of just really hits the mark on what I think the landscape of sort of that otherworldly pagan, you know, sort of primeval, primordial sort of landscape. And so it definitely sort of gives me fall, sort of autumnal, very stark. I always see the landscape in this as being sort of stark. It's sparse. I know some people say that this deck they bring out in the spring. It gives them more spring vibes, which I can kind of see that too. But for me, it definitely sort of goes with more of the darker, colder months, just because of, I feel like the way the landscape is portrayed. It's obviously more of a pip deck. So, you know, clearly the imagery is going to be, you know, more stark, but just something about it, you know, definitely gives me that fall. Like if you look at the pentacles, it has like these leaves, a wreath of leaves around it. That's definitely sort of giving me fall vibes. And again, whoops, see how slippery they are? The sort of the way they're dressed, like to me, this really symbolizes sort of that, that Celtic otherworld, just in their clothing and just the way that they're dressed, the more earthy, more natural, you know, really to me, like, would be more realistic. Now, we didn't live during those times, so we definitely have no idea what it was really like. So I'm definitely not going to speak, you know, on something that I'm not, I am definitely not, well-versed in, you know, the actual, like, living, and conditions, you know, that people during this time lived in. But to me, this does have a very stark and medieval feeling, and it just really gives me those fall autumnal vibes. So that is the Pagan Otherworlds. Next, I have the Noisy Museum Tarot. Now, this deck is really interesting, really fun. Definitely more of one of my abstract decks, which I'm getting more into, as I've been, like, stating in my other videos. So this is by LA Green Witch. And this, I believe, came from either Game Crafter or Make Playing Cards. I'll put a link in the description box below. But this deck is sort of gives me autumn vibes, I think, because of the coloring. Definitely. I feel like due to the coloring in this deck, sort of like the shadowy, because it's based on artwork. So sort of like the shadows and the colors in the deck. But it just kind of gives me the feeling of walking around a huge art museum on a blustery, like, chilly fall day. So I live not far from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It's a museum that I frequent quite a bit. Due to COVID, not as much as I did, but we do frequent the Metropolitan Museum of Art quite a bit. It's one of my favorite places to go and to be. And so this deck just sort of gives me the vibe of walking around a big museum like that, a big art museum, being surrounded by, like, the masters and, like, all this ancient art and, you know, just these beautiful paintings, and on a chilly fall day. And, you know, just sort of being inside and like I said, spending the day getting lost in a museum. So yeah, this gives me those fall vibes. And this deck is, you know, it does feature art, you know, that has been created already. So paintings by famous artists and masters, and there's pieces of them taken out, and then the creator, LA Green Witch, has added so some, like, collage pieces. If you follow LA Green Witch on Instagram, she does these beautiful journal spreads in her journal. She does a lot of collage in her journals. So you can kind of tell that sort of, you know, really inspired her, you know, in the creation of this deck. So she took, you know, artwork that was already existed, and then just added her own, like, collage pieces to it, and used different media. So yeah, so it's like a mixed media, you know, art deck, and I just love it. And it's really wonderful. And like I said, it's just like walking around an art museum on a fall day. So it definitely gives me those fall vibes. And this is the Noisy Museum Tarot. So next I have the Lonely Dreamer Tarot. This is the second edition. So the first edition did have different backs. So this is the second edition, and, like, these backs just scream sort of fall to me because of all these beautiful colors. And it looks like wildflowers that are in very autumn colors. So the backs definitely give me that fall vibe. But again, this is a deck that's based on pre-existing artwork. Odilon Redon is the artist. This was by M. Wotherspoon, I believe, put this together. Like I said, second edition. But again, something about this, like, because a lot of it is shadowy, and sort of, like, darker, but there are, like, these deep colors included, definitely put me in that fall mood. It's definitely a deck that I find myself, you know, would be reaching for during those fall months. As soon as we start to get into the colder months, I love this Hermit card. I don't know if you can see, I know there's like a little glare, but yeah, it's just gorgeous. It's very interesting. It definitely warrants a deep dive. This is one of those decks that, you know, you're going to want to take a deep dive into, and kind of really get into the guidebook so you can get, an idea of why the paintings were chosen, and sort of how they relate to the meanings, our traditional tarot meanings, but definitely an autumnal color palette for sure. You know, some of the images are a little, I don't want to say disturbing. I don't want to use that word because it's not really disturbing, but some of them definitely, you know, are different and kind of like a little bit jarring, you know, when you see them, or you might have like some sort of reaction to them. Sort of like that infamous card in the Marielle Tarot. I don't like to use disturbing, but I guess like for some people it might be disturbing, or shadowy, you know, have that sort of shadowy feeling. And so that's like sort of, to me, this like is a good ancestor deck, like connecting with ancestors, which I, you know, I do a lot around Samhain. So that's why I feel like maybe I'm reaching for this deck. This for sure would be the deck I move to for ancestor work. So, yeah, so this is the Lonely Dreamer Tarot. This is the 2nd edition. Next we have, unfortunately, another out of print deck. I'm sorry. This is the Incidental Tarot. This is by Holly DeFount. And like a funny story about this deck, I actually got the last copy ever made of this deck. She wrote me a handwritten note, the creator, to let me know that I got the 1000th deck. I guess they only printed 1,000 and I received the last one. This is a really interesting deck. I actually have it in order because usually when I don't use my tarot decks for a while, I end up putting them back in order as a way, sort of a way to, as a way to cleanse them. But this deck is really pretty. I believe I first was introduced to this deck on Dawn Michelle at Boho Tarot on her channel. And I don't know, something about it really just kind of spoke to me. I just thought it was really beautiful. And it really just does give me those, again, those autumn vibes. Because of course, the color palette, that always sort of like, I feel like color is such a huge influence on tarot decks for me and like the feelings I get for them. So something about the colors on this, again, just sort of give me those fall and autumnal vibes. And also just the vibe of the deck. It's a little whimsical. It's a little bit storybook, you know, which again, kind of always puts me in that sort of headspace. Definitely like the fall and the winter, you know, kind of any decks that are a little bit whimsical and tend towards the fairy tale like, I usually, you know, do tend to use them. I love this death card. But yeah, I just, I find this deck to be very soothing, like very lovely. And again, give off those fall, you know, autumnal vibes. Let me try to get to some of the minors, since all we're looking at it is a pip deck. So it's definitely pip-ish. I really don't own many pip decks at all because I find reading with them difficult, but I do love the aesthetic of this deck. So here we have the arrows. And then let's see. So the arrows, the Arrow King. And then we have the rose, which is the cup suit. So yeah, so like I said, they just, to me, give off very autumn vibes. And then let's see, the bard. And then quills, which is for swords. So yeah, they're just really beautiful. I love the choices for the suits. I like the way they've renamed, you know, a lot of the cards. But yeah, it definitely has a storybook, you know, feel to it. And then these definitely give off the oak. Oaks are for pentacles, obviously. So, you know, these oak leaves and the acorns, you know, are definitely giving off that autumnal feeling. But again, I don't typically enjoy pip decks, but this one like definitely spoke to me. And I sort of like got it like almost immediately, and I'm so glad I did, because like I said, I got the last copy of this deck. Look at the Oak Queen, the Queen of Pentacles, probably one of my favorite Queen of Pentacles. I don't know, something about it. She's just so beautiful with her oak, you know, crown. And I sort of have always loved the story of the oak, the king, the Oak King and the Holly King. And so yeah, so this one speaks to me and definitely gives me those fall vibes. So this is the Incidental Tarot. Okay, so next is the Vision Quest Tarot. This is a mass market deck. I believe it's US Games. So this deck is really the only sort of Native American indigenous type of deck that I have, like indigenous people type of deck that I have. And this deck is very special to me. It reads almost like an oracle deck, not so much a tarot deck. And it is does have like some Thoth influences, which I don't read Thoth, I never have, but I did feel very called to this deck when I was researching the land that I live on, and what indigenous tribes lived here, because the area that I live in is very heavily influenced, like the names of the towns, they're all Native American words and names. And it's just very disturbing to think about how their land was stolen from them and how it was taken and how they were forced off this land. So there's a big connection for me to understanding which tribes lived here, and specifically where I specifically live. And so I sort of, as I was researching and finding out about those tribes and learning more about it, and just ensuring that I was being respectful of, you know, the people who did live here, you know, even though it was thousands of years ago, you know, this was their land. And we know that, you know, we were not the first people, you know, here, and this area was heavily colonized, as was all of North America, you know, if we're being honest. So, so this deck, just something about it just really spoke to me in relation to, connecting to those sort of like land spirits and the people who were here, you know, who've been here, whose this land this is and was. And I just feel like this has such a beautiful earth energy, and it just sort of really taps you into that earthy, you know, harvest, you know, energy, which is like typical for this time of year. So definitely, you know, pull this out as a way to connect, you know, during that month of November, that Thanksgiving holiday, which we know is a very disturbing and controversial holiday in this country, in the country of the United States. You know, it is definitely off-putting when you think about the celebratory, you know, way that Thanksgiving is portrayed in this country. And so I feel like this is just this deck is a small part in a small way that I can honor and have respect for, you know, those people who were forced off the land that I live on right now. And just sort of to honor them, you know, and to honor their struggle and what they went through. And not that I would ever understand it, but just to try to connect with that energy of this land that I live on. And this deck is just beautiful for that elemental, earthy, you know, connection to the land, and nature, and honoring those people and their culture and their practices that connected them to this land. And I just think this is a really beautiful deck for that, you know. And then I do pull this out, you know, during the month of November, like I said, as a way to honor and sort of keep sacred, you know, what those people went through, what, you know, what they had to endure, as their home, you know, and their land was being colonized by others. So I definitely use this deck. I try to use it in a very respectful way, and just as a way to connect to those people. And like I said, this land that I live on, which is stolen land. So this is the Vision Quest Tarot. It is by US Games. Next up is the Crow Tarot by MJ Coulinane. So these are the backs, very autumn vibes. But I feel like for me, I mean, I love crows all year. But something about crows, like crow energy, definitely feels autumnal to me. And then even like winter, you know, the winter months too. Something about that crow energy, just, it feels very cold weather, you know, fall energy. So this deck always sort of reminds me of the fall. And I've had this deck for a really long time. And so like I used to use it, you know, every fall. So it's very like sort of nostalgic for me, this deck, to use it, you know, during those times of years. So I used to use this like all throughout the fall and the winter. And we have a lot of crows around here. There's just huge murders of them like flying around, and they're a lot of times they're always like right outside our window in the trees. They're always calling to each other, you know, just vocalizing quite a bit. So so I just do love, I love that crow energy. And so yeah, so this deck always has given me those fall vibes, and sort of that fall earthy energy. And the crow energy, always, you know, something I sort of look to work with during these colder months and sort of during this autumn season. So that is the Crow Tarot. And another one that I've been working with through September, and I just had to leave it in the bag so that we can just bask in the gloriousness of this most adorable squirrel you've ever seen. And of course, this is the Oak, Ash, and Thorn Tarot. And like, just look at the backs. I mean, the backs just scream fall, obviously, with their leaves. But yeah, this deck is just absolutely gorgeous. I feel like everyone's pretty familiar with this deck. I've been, like I said, using it throughout the month of September. I just did my autumn equinox tarot spread, and I pulled the Devil in one of the positions, and it was very interesting and very challenging for me, but also a really beautiful message. So I'm kind of glad that I got the Devil card. But whoops, and we have the two little reference cards in there too. But this deck is, like I said, just is exquisite, and just is everything fall and autumn in a forest. Like, as if you went into the forest during this season in this, you know, hemisphere. This is where you're going, you know, this is what you're going to see, what you're going to encounter. It's just sort of like a little portal, like you're looking through this portal into a forest during the fall. And these are the images that you would capture. And it's just absolutely magnificent, and just everything I could ever want in an animal tarot deck. I do not use animal decks very often. I don't mind animals in the deck, but I do not have any other all animal decks other than the Luna Lipin, which is the bunnies deck. Other than that, I don't believe I have, I've rehomed the cat tarot I had. I do not have animal decks. I just don't connect with their energy. But this one, from the second I saw it being created, you know, I signed up for that reminder about Kickstarter, because I just knew that this was the animal deck that I would use, you know, and that I would connect with. Again, that forest energy, you know, just that very natural world. Again, I feel like it's a portal into a forest. during the fall months, and it is just magical and beautiful and everything I could ever want in an animal deck, and gives me all those fall and autumn vibes. So that is the Oak, Ash, and Thorn Tarot. And here's that little squirrel again. So moving on to more of the Samhain / Halloween feel decks for me. This is the Dark Mansion Tarot. So again, a pretty familiar deck. I know they have like a one with the brownish backs. I have the blue backs. But yeah, so this deck is just fun. It has that sort of gothic, you know, feel to it, like a Victorian gothic mansion. So, and these are the characters that live in the village surrounding this mansion and that live in the mansion. So yeah, so this just, you know, is always kind of give me those Halloween type vibes. It sort of reminds me of like the Addams Family, something about it, you know, or, you know, just sort of, like I said, that haunted mansion, haunted castle. It's definitely gives me the Halloween feels. The colors in this deck are just superb. The saturation in color, it's just amazing. It's absolutely amazing, the colors in this deck. It is like that rose petal finish, which I know people, you know, have a love-hate relationship with, because they do stick. They definitely stick together, but it is really nice tactile experience using this. So it's fun, like when you just kind of want to have that different tactile experience. But yeah, I love this. Probably one of my most favorite Eight of Swords, like in any deck. Just really fun. Like a little quirky, you know, a little bit creepy. Some of the people are like, you know, the figures, their faces and things, it's a little bit creepy. But yeah, definitely giving me the creepy Halloween-y, you know, kind of like the haunted mansion, you know, type vibes. And I love it. I just absolutely love this deck. Typically I only pull it out around Halloween, honestly. I don't use it at other times of year. It's just one of those decks that, but I would never get rid of this deck. It's too special and unique, and I just love it. And again, like I said, the aesthetic quality of this deck is amazing. The color saturation, they're just beautiful. It's a beautiful deck. So, so that of course is the Dark Mansion Tarot. Next up for more Halloween type feeling decks is the Everyday Witch Tarot. I love this deck. I will always love this deck. This deck will always have a special place in my heart. Again, it's one of those decks that like a lot of people have, and a lot of people have feelings about. But for me, this will always sort of have that Halloween vibe, just because of the way the witches are depicted, with their little striped stockings and their little witch hats, and but it's just a really fun deck, and it's honestly a good reader. It's a Rider-Waite-Smith clone, but it reads really well. But I love all the cats, you know, that feature, and again, like I said, the hats, those like signature traditional, you know, Wicked Witch hats. This definitely sort of gives me that Halloween Town, Hocus Pocus, the Good Witch vibes, you know. And I love it. You know, it's a deck, like I said, that I will always love. It will always have this special place in my heart, because I did get this deck after sort of taking a big break from tarot, and just with a lot of things going on in my life. And then I got this deck, and it just brought me so much joy, and just brought me back, oddly enough, brought me back to my witchy self, which I had sort of let go of and sort of put away and was sort of ashamed of for a long time. And this just, it brought me back to tarot and that witchy feeling. And I just love pulling this deck out around Halloween, because it gives me those feelings of dressing up as a witch when I was a kid. You know, for Halloween, I always wanted to be a witch. And then my mother would like convince me to like be something else. I think one year, like my grandmother and her made me a Cinderella costume out of like old curtains. So talk about like Sound of Music, like imitating life, like art imitating life, life imitating art. But they actually made me a Cinderella costume. So I was forced to be Cinderella one year, but I always wanted to be a witch. And this deck just gives me those, I'm being a witch for Halloween. vibes, and I am a witch. So, but I know it's like kitschy. It's definitely kitschy, you know, again, with the striped socks and the pointy hats, but I love it because it's like, it reminds me of being a kid. So it definitely has that feeling, but a kid at Halloween, like that feeling of like Friday, Halloween, you worn your costume to school, you know you're going trick-or-treating, like you're going to a Halloween party. That's the vibe that this gives me, and I don't know, I just adore it, and it will always come out at Halloween, and I love it for everything that it is, and I love it for everything that it isn't, but it is a good reader, and it gives, you know, really good readings as well. So that's the Everyday Witch Tarot. We could not have a video about fall decks or Halloween decks without the Halloween Tarot. This deck is sort of along the same line as the Everyday Witch for me in terms of the feelings it gives me. It is trick-or-treating in a deck. It's basically like if trick-or-treating was a tarot deck, it would be this. It would be this. And so, yeah, so this gives me all the Halloween feels from when I was a kid. This gives me the Hocus Pocus vibes. And it gives me, you know, all those like, you know, scary, you know, spooky, maybe not scary, but spooky things that go along with Halloween. But yeah, I absolutely love it. I love the suits, like them changing the suits, the bats and the imps and the pumpkins. I just absolutely love it. Like I said, it reminds me of being a kid at Halloween. It reminds me of going around my neighborhood and trick-or-treating. You know, with a big group of kids from my neighborhood, and, you know, sort of going home, and like my mom never cooked on Halloween because it was like such a crazy day. So it would be like a pizza night, or, you know, we would get like order in food, or, you know, dad would bring home food. I don't know. It just has a lot of really nostalgic vibes for me. And like I said, we couldn't have a video about these types of decks without this deck. I know a Trick or Treat Tarot just recently came out. You know, I'm sort of like not really purchasing a lot of decks right now, but even still, I'm not interested at all because I have this one, and like I will never get rid of this one. This is Halloween in a tarot deck. It's the Halloween Tarot. It is exactly what it says it is, but it's just amazing. It's amazing to pull out and play with around Halloween, and like even on Halloween, you know, just do some fun, you know, readings, you know, and just have, you know, embrace that Halloween trick-or-treating energy. So definitely, I love this deck. The Halloween Tarot, it will never go away. It is Halloween in a tarot deck. And next up for sort of Halloween vibe decks is the Tarot of Vampires, which I feel like everyone is also very familiar with, as this has been around quite a long time. But I actually just purchased this like maybe 5 days ago. So this is my newest addition to my tarot library. And I waited a long time. I went back and forth and back and forth. And this is definitely a sort of a combination of different YouTube tarot creators like Lisa Pepez, who did a deep dive of this deck, which pretty much pushed me over the edge. I did watch it a while ago, but I kind of like put it off. But then all of a sudden I was just like, you know what? I watched a walkthrough of the Horror Tarot, which looked amazing. Like I watched a few of them, and it does look, you know, it looked really cool. I rehomed the Darkwood Tarot, so I was like a little, I don't know, on the fence about that one. But I love Abigail Larson's artwork, and I feel like the Horror Tarot really sort of showcases her artwork way better than the Darkwood Tarot did. But that's for a different discussion. But I went back and forth, and I was like, maybe I'll get the Horror Tarot. That's going to be a really good addition for this time of year. And instead, I pulled the trigger on Tarot of Vampires. So this is very new to me. I'm familiar with the imagery because I've seen it so much. Like I said, this deck has been around a while. And the guidebook, like everyone says, is the just gem of this deck. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the imagery. It's very gothic. Again, very gothic. You know, very vampire. I feel like anyone who grew up, when I grew up, we went through our vampire phase, like of like being obsessed with vampires. Just saying. I am not ashamed to admit, like I've watched the Vampire Diaries literally like 6 or 7 times all the way through. I don't know why I love that show so much. but I do. And I love the vampires, I love the witchy energy in it. So I will never grow old of that, you know, of watching that show, which is, you know, it's not really relatable to this deck. But again, just that vampire energy and that vampire archetype, like what they must grapple with. Like think of the vampire Lestat, you know, they were so complex, had so many layers. There was so much going on with them. And I feel like that's what this deck is really sort of, there's a lot of lessons to be learned when we take the vampire archetype and that myth and those like stories that go along with vampires and put them with the tarot and like you connect them, you know, and it becomes this one powerful tool with a very powerful message. So like think about, you know, the Dracula movie, you know, with Keanu Reeves and Gary Oldman. I mean, he was so creepy and like so gross and scary in that movie, but like you can't, I feel like you can't tell me you didn't feel a little sorry for him. Like there was that, when he like sort of took the form of a man and you felt something for him, you know, even though he was a monster and he was like cursed and he, you know, you felt this compassion and something, you know, that there was something of the man left. And I feel like this is like the perfect sort of, like I said, archetype to pair with a tarot deck because there's a lot of messages. And like I said, I just started reading the guidebook. So, you know, I have a long ways to go, but yeah, this is going to be, I feel like a great deck for this time of year, sort of that dark, shadowy energy around Samhain and Halloween. And, you know, I feel like you could probably use this deck anytime. I could see using this deck around Valentine's Day, sort of that immortal love, you know, type energy, that immortal beloved energy. So I could definitely see, you know, using this around Valentine's Day as well. But I'm excited to use this around Halloween. And I'm really glad I got it. I'm really looking forward to getting to know this. So this is the Tarot of Vampires. So the last deck that I'm going to share is another one that I use around Samhain, and this is the Darkness of Light Tarot. So definitely for me a more shadowy deck, you know, just because of the aesthetic of this and just sort of that energy that goes with it. It definitely reminds me of the darker half of the year. So I do use this one starting around Samhain, and I usually use it through the winter because it also kind of gives me winter vibes. You know, that turning inward, you know, that working on our inner self, which to me is a lot of what shadow work is. It's not negative. It's just sort of revealing what hidden things that, or things that we may be ignoring or pushing down and not, you know, not letting come forward. So this is the 4th edition. It's on really nice linen cardstock. I'm very happy I got this. I actually had an older edition that I rehomed after I got this one because I really wanted this linen cardstock. But this just definitely gives me those shadowy, you know, sort of darker vibes, you know, not necessarily creepy, but definitely a little bit more primal. And like I said, I tend to work with this deck because this is one that I usually feature in winter decks as well. But I feel like it deserves to be mentioned here because I do use it, you know, starting around that. For me, this is another one that sort of connects me. It's sort of like an ancestor working deck. Or, you know, when they talk about, you know, how the veil is thinnest around Samhain, and it's a good time to connect with, you know, loved ones who have passed or just ancestors or, you know, spirit guides and things like that. But this definitely taps me into that energy. I do have Italian heritage in this deck. The majors are in Italian. I do have Italian energy, and it does sort of give me that, again, that I have Italian heritage, and it kind of taps me into that ancestor energy a little bit by having the majors titles be in Italian. And just something about it, like I says, it's definitely gives me that feeling of when that veil is thin and the the other world is closer than we think, you know, and we can kind of feel it all around us. So this deck definitely gives me those vibes, and I always pull it out using it around Samhain for sure. And again, I use it throughout the whole winter because it definitely reminds me of that turning inward, that stark, sort of dark, gray, blustery, cold, you know, weather. And like I said, some of them are like a little spooky, you know, like what you would think of, like, you know, if you were thinking of like, you know, spooky tales and things like that. But it definitely gives me those autumn vibes in a lot of ways. So I love using it around this time of year, and I just adore this deck. It's beautiful. And it really does tap into that sort of shadow energy. So that's the Darkness of Light Tarot. And we have one little bonus deck. I'm not really featuring Oracle, but this Oracle deck I cannot not mention. This is the Earthly Souls and Spirit Oracle, and this is the original independent edition. I know it's coming out in mass market, which people are very excited about, but I've had this deck for quite a long time. I believe it came from Make Playing Cards, but I have had this deck for quite a while, and it, again, is my absolute favorite for using around Halloween and Samhain, because this is that witchy energy, the season of the witch, the witch's new year, whatever you want to refer it, you know, as, this is the deck. It's so absolutely beautiful. Terry Foss's artwork just speaks to my soul. And like I said, I've had this deck for a very long time. And it is the epitome of, you know, that witchy energy. And again, this is Samhain. If the Halloween Tarot is Halloween in a deck, this deck is Samhain in a deck for me. I just absolutely love the keywords. Again, you could use this deck intuitively. It's so fun to just take this out and spread it all around around Samhain and just absorb the images. I absolutely love it. I probably will get the mass market version because I believe there's some additional cards or different cards, or some of it's been changed. I probably will because I literally am obsessed with this deck. But it's just beautiful and magical, and it's Samhain, and I could not film a video without bringing this out and mentioning it. So this is the only Oracle deck I'm going to be talking about, but it is the Earthly Souls and Spirits Oracle, and it is my most favorite Oracle deck of all time. Nothing could take its place. It's magical. It's witchy. It's everything that I could ever want in an Oracle deck. And again, it encapsulates my absolute favorite time of year. I do use this again throughout the winter as well, because it gives me those vibes too. So this is one that's, you know, I typically use it all the time, but Samhain, autumn vibes, 100% witchy vibes. So yeah, so that's the Earthly Souls and Spirits. This is the independent version. I look forward to the mass market coming out, but yeah, Earthly Souls and Spirits. And this is an honorable mention because I am actually filming a full walkthrough of this deck. This is the Samhain Tarot. I am like literally so excited about having this deck and working with it. And I did get the large companion guide. I'm so excited about this deck. I'm not gonna, you know, go through it now, but this is definitely a deck I will be using around this time of year, around Samhain, again, you know, to do shadow work, just to tap into that, you know, sort of dark half of the year energy. This deck is, I know is going to be just so therapeutic, and I'm so excited to work with it. But just honorable mention, I will be definitely using this in the month of October, and I will be putting up the walkthrough of this deck. So if that's something that you'd be interested in, I'll be talking a lot about the guidebook and the artist, the photographer who created this deck. It's a masterpiece. I'm so excited. But that's it. That's it for the fall and autumn decks. I feel like that was a lot, and this is a very long video. And if you're still here, I applaud you. I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to hear what decks you're working with. Please comment below. Tell me which ones you have that I showed, or ones that you're interested in, or just whatever you're using this fall and autumn and Samhain and Halloween during, you know, your tarot practice. And I will see you all in the next video. Bye.